Good morning, everyone. I'm Ron Kirksey, President of the Akron chapter, PRSA. Pleased to welcome everyone to the 6th Annual Award-winning YouToo Social Media Conference, co-presented by Time Warner Cable and Robert J. Events and Catering. Proceeds from today's conference benefit the YouToo Scholarship Fund and support professional development and event programming for both the Akron area chapter of PRSA and the Kent State University PRSSA chapter. Today's schedule is full of respected industry thought leaders in social media and social visualization, which is the theme for this year's conference. Before we hear from our first expert, we have a few points of business to share with you. We could not have hosted today's conference without the support of our sponsors. If you're attending as a sponsor or with a sponsoring company, please stand as I recognize our sponsors. Thank you especially to our co-title sponsors, Time Warner Cable and Robert J. Events and Catering. Next, thanks to our host from Kent State University's College of Communication and Information and the School of Journalism and Mass Communication, who are the Ruby chapter sponsors. I'd like to personally thank Stan Worden, Dean of the College of Communications and Information, and Thor Wasbaden, Director of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication, for their continued support of this conference. They not only supply the space, equipment, and support staff, they also encourage faculty members, staff, and students to actively participate in the planning and execution of this major forum each year. Other contributing sponsors include Akron Children's Hospital. Anybody standing? Oliver Printing, FedEx Custom Critical, and the Regional Marketing Alliance of Northeast Ohio, otherwise known as the governing body of the Cleveland Plus campaign. Our session sponsors include the School of Communication Studies at Kent State University, the Summit County Alcohol, Drug, Addiction, and Mental Health Services Board, the Buzzmaker LLC, InfoCision, Marcus Thomas LLC. Please join me in thanking our generous sponsors. Also, a committee of more than 15 professionals and students helped plan today's events. Committee members and volunteers, please stand up and be recognized. Okay, come on. Thank you. And it wouldn't be complete without recognizing Jennifer Kramer, who is the heart and soul of this group, and also her leadership helps this come off every year. It's just incredible what she does. Thank you, and your countless hours have made this conference possible. It's good to see so many PRSA members in attendance today, but we have a lot of non-members joining us also. And here's where you get the shameless promotion. Consider joining PRSA to advocate for a profession by contributing to the business case for public relations. Enhance your daily performance with the latest issues, case studies, and research analysis. Benefit from members-only offers, including discounts on professional development seminars, conferences, and events, and that includes free webinars. Connect with other members and access industry tools and your personalized homepage, and accelerate your career at any level. You can get membership materials in the lobby or contact Christine Boyd or Robin Clark, our Akron area chapter membership directors. Christine and Robin, would you stand? Okay, hand up's good. Another professional development opportunity to consider is the fully online degree program in public relations that is perfect for busy professionals. The online public relations master's degree program here at Kent State is designed for students who wish to pursue careers in strategic public relations and marketing communications and develop new skills, including social media, marketing, and advertising. For more information about the online Kent State Masters of Arts degree program with a concentration in public relations, visit www.publicrelations.kent.edu. Now for the important stuff. Restrooms are located down the hall. There's a map on page 3, or you can just follow the crowd if you need assistance. For those of you who brought computers, this building is wireless. You can tweet about the conference, follow along with presenters, or take notes for colleagues. Our hashtag is YouToo 2013. Instructions for logging into the Kent State Flash Zone system are on page 10 of the program. If you're having problems, raise your hand and technology specialists will assist you. One more thing before I begin our program. I'd like to announce this year's YouToo Scholarship winner. The YouToo Scholarship was created in conjunction with the Akron Area Chapter of PRSA and our generous sponsors. I'd like to thank these groups again for making this possible. The Scholarship Committee was especially impressed with the qualifications of this year's winner. Her leadership roles in PRSSA, including serving on the executive board for 2 years, her work with this conference, attending the past 3 YouToo conferences, serving the past 2 years as student co-chair, presenting at the National PRSSA Conference in 2011, having served a real-world internship and 2 on-campus PR experiences at the Tannery and Flash Communications, graduating with honors this May, and the exceptional quality of her submission and samples, all qualified for the 2013 YouToo Scholarship winner. Her mother is a Kent State University alum, and although her family resides in Annapolis, Maryland, her mother is a Kent State, for the past 4 years, she has participated in Kent State experience. Join me in congratulating this year's scholarship recipient, senior PR major, Taylor Titus. Thanks again to our sponsors who make this a reality. Now let's begin today's program. I have the pleasure of serving as room manager today, so please let me know if there's anything I can do to assist you. I'd like to thank our sponsor for this session, the College of Communication and Information at Kent State. And now I have the honor of introducing our opening speaker. Kevin Dugan is Director of Marketing at the Empower Group and co-author of the Bad Pitch blog. He has used content to advance client goals for the bulk of his 20-year career in marketing communications. Kevin has been immersed in digital technology, social media, and all forms of content for his entire career, advising clients as large as General Electric and Xerox, as small as a startup, and most everything in between. He started blogging in 2002 and has a background in custom publishing. Today, Kevin is also editor-in-chief of Media is Power, an independent news platform created by the Empower Group. Join me in welcoming Kevin Dugan.
All right. How's everybody doing today? Awesome. Thanks for having me today. Before I get started, I'm actually going to do some AV test here. Okay, so the story that I have to tell is the name of the presentation, Get the Picture, Get Lost. When Luke asked me to present here today, I started kind of doing just a mental list of content that I've created in the past that would apply to the presentation, and wound up remembering that back in 2009, I wrote a paper called Get the Picture or Get Lost, talking about the need for visual communications. Now, I can tell you that the only similarity between that paper and this presentation is the title. But if you figure I've spent 4 years preparing for this presentation, it better not suck. So Honestly, I think that the name I would change also. I really think that the name should be Get the Picture and Get Found. You know, the paper, when I wrote it, it was about 6 months before the iPad was introduced, and that really changed everything, and everything's sort of sped up in the last 4 years as well. But I also feel like the Get Lost is a little too snarky, so I've mellowed in my age. So I talked in the video, or I showed in the video that the consumer attention span's dying, and as proof of this, I've started putting at the beginning of my presentations a summary of my presentation, or the most important point in the presentation, and then I spend the rest of the time kind of backing that up and backing that out. So if you only pay attention to one slide, this is it, and it is tweetable. Bottom line is that visual content is huge right now, but it's also part of a larger communications picture. Hey, I'm from West Ohio, so I'm pretty pragmatic. I'm an Ohioan like you guys. And I just want to make it clear that it is part of a bigger picture, that we need the whole thing to combat the noise that is coming out in the world, that we're competing with to get in touch with our audiences, that is actually shrinking consumer attention spans. So it's a 3-act play that I have for you guys today. I just want to take a quick look at what we're seeing when it comes to visual content and just kind of classify that so we're all on the same page. And there's some examples in there too. And honestly, I feel like why it's happening is potentially the most helpful for everyone. I do get into how you can tap into it, certainly, but it doesn't get too granular. And I feel like if you've got sort of the underpinnings of why this has become so popular, it'll be even more helpful for you coming out of this presentation. But before I get into the presentation, if you are a professional versus a student, can you raise your hand? Okay, that's a pretty good mix. So if you didn't have your hand raised, introduce yourself to someone who had their hand raised. The whole reason that I'm here today is because of networking. When I was in school, they'd bring professionals into class, they'd talk a little bit, and that's how I got my first job and internships, and the rest of the story brings me here today. So this is one of the other reasons that I'm glad you guys are here, is you can network with everybody in the room, all the professionals, so that's great. So as far as what we're seeing, in a nutshell, I'm not going to go too deep on text formatting and illustration, but just to make the point that there's a lot of different visual content, including what my favorite subheads to break up some copy and help with transition in editorial. But I will talk a little bit about data visualization and infographics, as well as photos and video. And it's interesting because I have a lot of facts, and I've got my sources here that I compiled, and they're impressive facts, but the numbers are just so large through this presentation that it's almost hard to fathom. I mean, the fact that 1.5 billion pieces of content are created daily, my first question is, how do they define content? But it's just a point to say that there's a lot of content being generated, and that's all content that we're competing against when we are trying to get our messages out there to certain audiences. So when it comes to data visualization, let's say I was trying to make a point using data visualization that McDonald's is a very big company. I could, without data viz, I could just say, hey, they have 15,000 locations just in the US. I think it's like twice that globally. I could say, in addition to that, Starbucks, which is on every corner, only has 11,000. And in addition to that, Walmart only has 4,200. Granted, they have a bigger footprint, but I think it would be much more compelling if I simply showed you this. And that is a data visualization of all 15,000 McDonald's. Now, this may make half of the room go, yes. May make the other half go, oh my God. But the point is, it got an emotional reaction out of you that the numbers didn't, even when I stacked them with other smaller numbers to help prove out my case. So it's a much more compelling argument when you can take data and serve it up in a way that really gets your point across, that not only are there 15,000 McDonald's in the US, they're taking over, they look like a plague or something, and we're infested. I feel like that's a much stronger argument. Similarly, there's a huge opportunity with data visualization because we are getting more access to it. Analytics are standard on just about any site that you sign up for these days. And those are all opportunities to influence your content. In fact, Nate Silver, he's a statistician who actually predicted 49 out of the 50 presidential state wins during the election, during the campaign. He has noted that every day, 3 times a second, we produce the equivalent amount of data that the Library of Congress has in its entire print collection. And I did some research and saw that was about 35 million books, and I did the math. I think it's correct. That means 105 million books of data are generated every second of every day. And that's kind of huge, but I think the point is that there are a lot of opportunities in numbers that we may not have thought about in the past. We tend to be focused maybe more on editorial, which makes good sense, but content can come from a variety of places, and I think that's important to note. Similarly, infographics kind of take it to the next level, and they're telling a story in a visual, snack-sized format. Infographics are extremely popular. I'm convinced people will share them without even reading them. They just see them, they like how they look. I've also been convinced that you could have a PDF with just Greek text in it for download. People would download it. But that's another story, another presentation. So it's interesting, though, because what I started to see is a couple different companies, especially Intel, have opportunities on Facebook for you to give them access to your profile. They get to peek at your profile in exchange for a visual. Well, in one case, it was the Museum of Me. It was actually a video. And it appeals to everybody's vanities. And so even I participated. This was one that talked about, what am I posting about? Made it, found it, liked it, meaning my content habits online. And what do you wind up doing typically? You share that. So suddenly, Intel has their brand distributed all across the web. And what I find really interesting about it, though, is in the process, anytime Facebook even says the word privacy, everybody flips out. But when you've got a brand that says, hey, if you let me look at your profile, I'll do this for you, it's almost like clicking on the terms of service that we never read. I'm sure that'll come back to haunt us someday, but I just find it interesting. And I think part of that is the whole visual concept. There's that desire to get that visual content. You want to share it, you want to tell people about yourself in a new way, and you're willing to do it. You don't really think about what in the past might have been tough to do and give them that access. So infographics can tell a very interesting story. They can go deep on a topic, but in a very shorthand summary. And the demand for them, like I said, is increasing. We looked at Google Insights for search, and it's been steadily increasing, the search queries for infographics since 2009. So honestly, I think that they're probably just going to get increase versus decline anytime soon. And that gets us to photos. This is the very first photo that was taken. I got this off of BuzzFeed, which is why I know it's in 1826. It came with the photo. But it's interesting because since that photo was taken, 4 trillion images have been taken. Every 2 minutes, we take more pictures than were taken in the entire 19th century. Just to give you an idea of how easy it is for people to take photos now compared to the past. And just in 2012, 380 billion images were taken. So the BuzzFeed article talked about the fact that there has been a steady increase. In fact, it's been accelerating, that taking a photo is much easier than typing out. We used to complain about only 140 characters, and now it's like, that's so much to type. How many of you guys tweeted my thing? It was so long, right? I'm like, I know this is too long. Nobody's going to tweet it. My summary, right? But you could have taken a picture and tweeted it. I'll back up. You can do that in a second now. Anyway, clearly, I think that this just shows how ubiquitous the ability to take photos is. And as far as the power and what they can do, when the marriage equality discussion heated up again, the Human Rights Campaign went to Facebook and started an avatar campaign. Now, I'll be honest, avatar campaigns, typically the first thing people will say is, well, okay, it may have generated a lot of awareness, but did it generate action? Did it generate, in the case of a brand, did it generate sales? And, I guess my question is, was their goal awareness or was it something else? And I'm not sure, I don't have the answer to that question, but Facebook did the math and saw that, it's a very polarizing topic, but, in a couple days' time, they had a 120% increase above and beyond the normal amount of profile photo swaps that they have. So my point here is that it's not going to happen to everybody. Not everybody, can affect this kind of change. It's a very specific issue, which helped, but this can move very quickly. It's something very simple to do, and everybody showed their support. Yeah, I've even switched mine back since. But if awareness was their goal, they definitely got it. I think that the equivalent of trying to, do traditional offline PR and figure out a way to get in front of 2.7 million people, back in the day, that would have been a lot of press kits mailed to a lot of media outlets, and then you sit and you cross your fingers. So the ability to affect change quickly is interesting. I also found what I feel is the first Instagram news release. I feel it could be used as a news release. It was from the founder of Square, Jack Dorsey. He took a picture of the screen showing the sales, and they processed more than 3 million. This is back in 2011. And it was a big milestone for them. To me, that could have been the press release. That's all they needed to do. They could have sent that out, or if the media saw it, they could have run with the story from that. So I think that there's clearly an opportunity to tell a bigger story with images, and in a very utilitarian fashion, it can kill your word count, take it down like a huge level, which is awesome. It's interesting, you also start to see the media use Instagram. And in this case, they were wondering about the iPhone being the only camera that you need. So they were just doing an experiment and requested people send them photos of how they start the morning. Now, yeah, they might get some really crazy photos that they don't want to put anywhere near online and they can't unsee. They're that bad. But that said, they're crowdsourcing this content. It's authentic, which is what they're looking for. It's not, scrubbed and checked by legal and gone back and forth and how many revisions. These people take it, they send it, and if they like it, they roll with it. So there's no need for an intermediary there. They go straight to the source and get that content. Very easy for them to do. Tumblr. I love Tumblr. This is one of my favorites. Sport balls replaced with cats. Tumblr is just amazing because it's like impulse publishing. You can do this, this snack-sized piece of content on a very specific subject, and that's all you do. And it's not even, the expectation isn't even that the thing will be permanent, but I really hope this one is. It's fun. And this whole single serving capability of it, it's a blogging platform, and we've had many of them around, but this one is just so easy, and it's so easily handles visuals that it just takes off. And a lot of meme-type content gets put up there, and that drives engagement and traffic. It's interesting because David Karp, the CEO of Tumblr, noted that 85% of their content is from the other 15 just being reblogged. There's like 15% of their content's original, meaning I put it there from somewhere else, and then the other 85 is people just resharing it. So think about that. That's a huge opportunity. If you become part of that 15% and get pulled into the 85, and it's a content distribution network like no other, and the consumers are doing it for you. I think that's really important. And granted, Tumblr's for very specific things like the cats, right? But I do think that there's applications above and beyond just the crazy like that. So if we start to look at video, I like to consider GIFs as part of this. This is, I think it's Trippin' Cat or Cat Trippin' or something like that. GIFs, it's funny, GIFs back in the day, we used to call them dancing baloney. We hated them. And now they're like an art form. There's a GIF film festival. They've really come into their own. And I feel like it's because everything is getting so snack-sized that suddenly it's like, no, wait, these are actually pretty decent. I mean, after award shows the next day, there's always an article on one of the pop culture sites that takes like the highlights and turns them into GIFs. And so you can just go and kind of do a recap with GIFs of people. Typically, it's like if they trip and fall or freak out or something, but still, it's interesting. Vine, what's interesting about Vine is I think that it's as important to Twitter as YouTube was and is to Google. And that, to me, is like the big significance of it. I think everybody else is kind of saying, well, I don't get it, or it's not taken off the way the others are. And I think that the point is that they're finding a very quick and easy way to bring video to their platform and engage more people with Twitter. So I think that's the big key takeaway there. But another sign that short attention span theater is here to stay is, this is one of the older factoids on here. YouTube is the #2 search engine, which always blows me away. And then you start to think, well, Google's #1 and they own YouTube. Monopoly. But I think the point is simply people want to find content. They're so used to going to YouTube anyway. It's got a search engine. They want to watch video, so they go there. 72 hours of videos uploaded to YouTube every minute. That's a lot of cat videos, ladies and gentlemen. But again, it just speaks to the fact that there's a lot of the stuff going on. It's so easy to do now that many, many people are doing it. Granted, some of this content isn't great, but that's not the point. It's funny, though, because then you take a look at binging, you know, with Netflix and a lot of the other video networks that are out there. You can mainline an entire series. Like I remember 6 Feet Under was canceled. They were already off the air, and I went in, and in the period of like maybe 2 months, I watched the entire series. And this has become a big thing. In fact, in some cases, it's even a badge of honor if somebody, you know, went to the trouble to stay up the entire night and watch 24 hours of the first season of some show that everybody at work is watching. It's the new Red Solo Cup, ladies and gentlemen. And it's to the point, though, that the reason I think it's even more significant is that it's starting to change. It's not just consumption, it's starting to change production. Netflix is starting to do their own content. They're bringing back Arrested Development, which is cool. But they also created House of Cards. And what they did, they filmed the entire season and said, here you go, have the whole thing. And I think it's still, the jury's still out on how successful that was, but it's moving upstream in that regard. And it's funny to me, though, that there's that literally scaling between snacking and binging. You're at either side of the spectrum with video. It's got that many applications for people, that much interest level. I mean, you know, my Wii is a home entertainment center. I can get access to half of these channels through my gaming device, hooked up to my TV and the internet, of course. So I talked about this before, but visual content moves fast, and I think another indicator of that is if you look at these sites, it's not a surprise that they're all top 3, but I think if you start to look at the dates when they launched, Tumblr being the oldest, and there's some qualifications. I mean, granted, 3rd most visited mobile site, they're going through a browser, not the app. Largest photo sharing site, so Facebook's not considered in that. They're a social media platform in that instance. But 3 years and they're the largest photo sharing site. 4 years and Vivo comes out of nowhere and they're the 3rd largest video platform. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it's like, just seems like I've started hearing about Vivo in the past 6 to 12 months maybe. And they're huge. Pinterest we all have heard about and might even be tired about hearing about all the buzz around them, but you know, 3rd largest social network, 4 years old, and then Tumblr. So this is moving very, very fast, and the uptake is intense. So why is it all happening, right? Why is this all happening? It's not just because people love to see sports balls replaced with cats. When I talked about this earlier about all the data, you know, as we generate this data, we get access to it, We use that to start informing the content, like search data, for example, or maybe your website, web traffic or social data. And then that, helps make better content. If you're looking at the search on your site or your blog and finding what people are looking for and they're not finding it, you can write about that content and they'll find it, right? So the content's going to be better, more well received, which will drive engagement. They'll share it, they'll like it, they'll comment on it, which drives up engagement. And now that means it's going to do better in search, which creates more data and starts the thing all over again, right? So it's like this almost vicious cycle. And as a result, we feel like we have to create visual content to stand out as the data expands, the 105 million books a second. And it's funny, though, because we're kind of perpetuating that issue with the consumer's attention span. It essentially means the window's tighter, and you need to do things like pay attention to this data to make sure that the content can make a connection with your audience. So I think it's a bit of a perfect storm with visual communications as it relates to where consumer habits are, fragmenting media, and technology convergence. And it's kind of a Venn diagram. There's a lot of overlap, and I may not have bucketed these exactly correctly in your opinion, but they're all in the ballpark. And the first most important one is that we're hardwired to tell stories. I mean, before we could even talk, we created visuals. This one was in a cave in France. I assume saying, "What do you want for dinner?" But and then we went to hieroglyphics, and I mean, the list goes on and on before we had actual language. And something else that's been happening is multitasking with multi-screens. There's screens everywhere. We've got our phone, we've got our laptop, we've got Wi-Fi, so we can have those in front of the TV. And that's just 3 devices. That doesn't even count the tablet. And so, we're multitasking, and sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. But it's funny because Ad Age did a study and realized that up to 27 times an hour, the average consumer switches media. Now, it's not like a conscious thing. I'm putting down my newspaper and turning on the radio. It's pretty seamless. They're just going about their day and happen to switch screens. Similarly, with these 11 hours a day consuming media, that's not literally a linear path of 11 hours. I mean, if you're in the car listening to the radio and you're driving down the highway, all the billboards, that's stacked, right? That's part of that 11 hours. They break it out separately, though, to come to the 11. But still, we're switching media a lot. We're accessing it, consuming it a lot. And I think that one of the big impacts between that and the rise of visual content, the convergence with the devices, I think one of the big things that's impacted on consumers is Ricky Van Veen nailed this quote. He said, "Documenting the experience is becoming more important than the experience itself," right? I remember taking my kids to a local playground, and it was like a photo op or something. They were parents, but I thought they were like amateur photographers that had shown up to take pictures of these kids. And I'm like, I'm not trying to be harsh, but can we play, I know I might get in your light, but I just love this. This is the inauguration, and everybody's there, and you're at the inauguration. That's something you want to savor and experience. And I would have been one of these people, but everybody's got their phone up making sure they get the pic, that they can Facebook out to their friends so everybody knows that they're there. So this is a big deal, and I think this is something we need to think about and as we do our work, in that, do you have an experience worth documenting? That gets to sharing. Keep in mind that these images, whether they're on Pinterest or elsewhere, or Tumblr, they're typically driving to other destinations if it's been shared on that network. So especially in the case of Pinterest, they can drive a lot of traffic. And Pinterest, I think, is just under, percentage-wise, it's just under Tumblr. Tumblr's 85%. I want to say they're like 75 or 80%. So again, you want to be part of that 25% that's being reshared and reshared across the site. You want to get caught up in that. In fact, sharing is such a big deal that across the entire internet, all internet traffic, 10% of it comes from sharing activity. So this is something that you need to think about. It's not just hoping that people can share it, making sure that, I remember I personally liked the share this button because it was one button, it was green, and it was subtle, and I had to throw that out the window because you just need the F and the T, and it's ugly, and you just slap it up there, and it works. because that's where everybody wants to share it. I had to remind myself that I was not the customer in that situation. And it's interesting because liking and sharing, distributing that content, it's kind of become a part of consuming it. Typically you would just, maybe read the paper or listen to the news and you'd be done with it. But in this case, you're almost signing off that you've completed it by liking it or sharing it. It's literally become part of that process, which is one of the reasons why I think it adds up to 10%. And the other thing that's done is, we don't really visit websites anymore. The websites come to us. This is a quote by a Mattel marketing director. And her point is, through things like Pinterest, think about it. I mean, it's kind of like stumble upon as far as discovering new sites and new things. Tumblr's the same way. You're not literally seeking these sites out. You find them on these sites. So that the users are coming to you, or the sites are coming to you, rather, to the users. And that's something else I think that is important to keep in mind as it relates to sharing, that you need to think about that whole process, not just maybe plan and publish, but promote and optimize above and beyond that as well. Technology, I talked a little bit about it, but it's making it pretty effortless to share. I mean, down to, you used to have a tape recorder, or, you might type something up in a word processor, take a photo, take a video, and they were all on different devices. I know at least one person in the room remembers that anyway. I do. Now it's all done on one device. And it's a phone too on top of that. Capture, edit, publish. In the past, even on the phone, the smartphone, that might have been done in 3 different apps. That's all done in one app now. If you have to go to multiple apps, you're done, you're toast. It needs to be just that dead simple, to the point that even Facebook, as they try to get better in mobile and get more market share in mobile, they made themselves essentially the operating system of the HTC, so that you don't even have to open up the app, it's there. You don't even have to click, because that's such a hassle. Obviously it's not, but still. They're trying to make the resistance to their app extremely nil, and it's working in that case. So I think the other thing we're starting to see that's helping with the content is create it with your friends through these apps. There's a fringe of apps now that you can create. You all go to the same event, the same concert, and you can all sort of share your take on it, your media, your pictures or video from it in the same album. And you're starting to see more of that. But it's interesting because when it comes to these smartphones and tablets, it requires us, the people in this room, to do more communication with less screen. But I also think that one of the things to keep in mind is that, in the past, especially when we talk about integrated marketing communications, you want to have that singular message, and that's still the case, but you also want to make sure that you take advantage of each of these different platforms. You want it to be small for the iPhone, but for iPad, maybe not, right? I mean, you've got that nice big tablet to play with, so you need to take these different platforms into account and still have that message, but tapping into the devices too is important. So that's sort of a new wrinkle. And again, as I mentioned before, visual gets more engagement. HubSpot's done studies, and I want to say images are shared twice as much as text updates, and videos shared like 12 times more than text updates on Facebook, according to HubSpot. So it's proven that they get more engagement, and that, again, gets better search results, which just starts the whole process over again. And the platforms get this. They know this. If you've been paying attention, you know that Twitter, now you've got to have, in addition to your avatar, you've got to have that, that photo behind your picture, right? You can customize that. They're also treating visuals and video differently. It's not just Vine. You can play videos in your stream, making it simpler. LinkedIn's really stepped up, and they've got the long panoramic opportunities on your company profiles, for example. That'd be weird if they had it on your actual profile, like a panoramic. I mean, think about it. But Facebook, same thing. And they're trying to make it easier to have really big visuals. Google Plus did it. And then after that, you've got not just the ability to serve them up and make them look nice, but they pimped out the profiles to take advantage of that. Then suddenly there was this race for everybody to have filters, because again, that's all condensing, where they don't want you to even have to go to another app so that you can put your photos on their platform, because they get what a big deal it is. It's funny because in Cincinnati, our daily, the Cincinnati Enquirer is Gannett, and they recently went to a smaller format. And, you know, bottom line is it was a cost-cutting issue, and they had to replace the presses anyway, so they went and tried to save some money in the process. But as a result, we started to see this where they're trying to emulate print, or sorry, they're trying to emulate online in their print design. They came out with a whole new design. It was more compact, but they didn't want to lose any of the impact that the old paper had. Similarly, I start to see, especially on sites like Mashable, for example, they're trying to emulate print. So it's kind of interesting to see them modeling each other, but those are things I think to pay attention to, and you'll see some interesting things happen there that you can really learn from and apply to your own work in how some of these publications are serving up their content. So how can you guys tap into it? Well, one of the big things I want you guys to remember, this is something I learned from Tom Martin at a conference recently, and he said, you know, when it comes to creating content, there are cornerstones and there are cobblestones. The cobblestones make up the cornerstones. An example is the Star Wars franchise. That would be the cornerstone. The 6 individual movies are the cobblestones. And as we all came to find out, George Lucas did the whole story. He just decided he was going to come in halfway, and then he realized he could only make 1/3 of that half of the story, turn it into 6 movies. Those are all cobblestones. So I guess my point is, even though we are dealing with the snack-sized, you know, attention deficit squirrel, you know, we're dealing with this issue. I think that it's important to say, yes, you do need to deal with that. You do need to think about how visuals can help improve your content and the effectiveness of it. But that doesn't mean everything's an infographic. You know, if this is a visual hammer, I don't want everything to start looking like visual nails. Think about the entire campaign, the entire project. What's the larger strategy? How does content play into that? What is the larger piece of content? What does the cornerstone look like? And then how can you snack size it? I used to say it was like an ice, you know, turning an iceberg into ice cubes. How do you go about doing that? So you can still come from that holistic strategic approach and make sure you've got the right message for your audience, but then you want to go and slice and dice in a way that makes the most sense. And then, you know, also, like I said, optimize for the audience, optimize for the platform you're going to be on, and make sure that you've got the right distribution technology on it for sharing and whatnot. All of those things need to come into play. In fact, I suggest that we start thinking about content more broadly. I mean, obviously we're talking about visual today, but my point is, instead of thinking it traditionally as editorial that might have some assets or some photos, I think we need to think about it in terms of editorial, design, and development, okay? So what is the story? How does that need to be told? You know, is that the equivalent of maybe a microsite experience? Does it need to be this immersive site? It's not part of the brand site. Well, that's a development question. There are different elements that can all impact the end result. You may write the best story on earth, but if it doesn't have any sharing tools, that's going to be a problem. And that might be a development question. It might not be. It might be pretty easy if you're on WordPress and can figure it out for yourself. That's great. But again, I think that not just what is the story, but how does it need to be told? What does that package look like? Think about it in those 3 facets at least, and I think you're going to be better off. Also, I think that we're at a point in our careers where we can no longer stay siloed yet aware of paid media. I think that we're doing ourselves a disservice based on all the different paid opportunities that are out there with social. You know, honestly, with Facebook anymore, if you really want somebody to see it, unfortunately, you have to spend some money and promote it. And for the right reasons, that might not be a bad thing. But, you know, just keep in mind what each paid, owned, and earned do, what they do well, the action that they create with the consumer, their strengths and weaknesses. And even if, you know, you're not in charge of the paid media, if it makes sense, you know, you should be recommending it. I think we should be to a point where we're looking at all 3 facets and figuring out what makes the most sense. So another thing I think that we should start doing is, if we're not already, is testing and learning. These are 3 different instances. I'm kind of a Instagram freak. To be honest, I shoot a lot and put it up there. But these are all 3 kind of tapping into the whole Instagram craze. Ponger is something where brands can go and they can claim their page. And essentially, if I find the brands that I like on there, like, I like Altoids, for example, I can take pictures of Altoids if I really want to. I wouldn't, but I might put them up there and I can get rewarded. So they're incentivizing consumers instead of just saying, hey, take 5 pictures of your kids in this outfit. I mean, typically we were doing these consumer-generated contests. There was just so much to them. It was such a pain that the consumers are like, I don't care how much that coupon's for. I don't care how much that drawing's for. I'm not going to do it. This is something that's much easier, much simpler to do. They get incentivized. It's almost like a loyalty program within the site. It may go nowhere, but you never know. FOAP, I have no idea who names these things, but FOAP is the equivalent of like a consumer Shutterstock, meaning that I downloaded the app like a week ago. I can upload my photos, tag them and everything, and if a brand buys it, I think they spend $10, 5 of it comes straight to me, 5 of it goes to the site. So, and you've got people on the site ranking it from like 1 to 5 stars. So there's some community in there too that's going on, but I was like, well, that's cool. And then they have missions where brands will come in and say, hey, whoever wins the mission, they'll get $100 or something like that. And then we get all that access to all those photos. And then if we buy one, again, it's $10 and you get $5. So suddenly people are able to monetize their hobbies. And Instagram contests, if you guys know about the site Statagram, which is a great way to kind of look at your analytics on Instagram, they have a contest page. It's actually really interesting because they're worldwide. There's a ton of different brands doing it. Clorox is doing one right now, I think. Folks are just trying it out. The site also, one of the reasons I think you guys should check it out is they actually have a how-to on how to construct your contest and what makes the most sense, sort of do's and don'ts. So they've got missions on Statagram too, but it's literally just get put in the drawing if you tag the photo with this and see what happens. So it's a little less formal than FOAP or Ponger, but it has a slightly better name. So there's that. So yeah, I think that just kind of going out there and there's always the concern, especially me as a pragmatic Midwesterner, of getting infatuated with the shiny new. And we were talking about this last night about QR codes. It's like, well, why wouldn't a QR code be a good thing on a billboard on the side of the highway? They should be everywhere. I had a QR code for breakfast. QR code's cleaning my oven right now. Yes, you can get infatuated. And like I said, the whole visual hammer, everything looks like a visual suddenly after this conversation. You want to turn your life's work into an infographic. Don't do it. Do it for the right reasons, but don't just do it because you got the fire about the visuals now. So I think that there's an opportunity to test and learn, that you're not just going off and, you need to form an opinion about this stuff at some point, or you're doing yourself a disservice. So by calling it test and learn, you can just test it out. You should still have, base it in strategy and what you're going to measure and what you're trying to do with it. But don't be afraid to do a small test and potentially turn it into a bigger one later. So I talked about thinking about content in terms of those 3 facets, but I also think that new forms of content are afforded communicators that we don't really stop to think of as opportunities. And they're not for everybody, certainly. These are niche opportunities. But man, if you have a local client or you're a local business, Foursquare is doing everything in their power to try and compete with Yelp. And so they've trying to give people more reasons to spend time at the site, not just to maybe unlock a badge and check in, which I haven't done yet. Gotta do it. But they have these Foursquare lists now that you as a brand can put out there so that when people check in, there might be some Kent State facts that people need to know, or there's a campaign going on right now with the development team and they want to put something out there, or new branding, what have you. There's a lot of different opportunities there, but you have to pick the right ones so it doesn't feel totally out of context and ham-fisted, and I think at least one of those examples might have been. But curated lists as far as Spotify, you know, you need to start asking yourself, well, what does my brand sound like? All five senses. Obviously, Starbucks knows what their brand smells like because they make coffee. It's pretty obvious. But they also went to the trouble to say, what do we sound like? What does our brand sound like? And now they've got a music label. In fact, they wound up baking it into their in-store Wi-Fi. It turned out beautifully for them. So start to think about, you know, if we had a curated playlist, if we curated apps, what would that look like? Curation's a big consideration these days that you should be having. And I talked about Intel's Museum of Me. Again, you know, is there an opportunity for you working with a developer to learn more about your target audience through Facebook by taking a peek at their profile to let them find out? I always talk about it in Cincinnati, like, you know, what kind of Cincinnati hometown hero are you, you know? Small, medium, or large, whatever. Something to think about. And state of the arts and permanent beta, you know, we're always thinking of, well, world class, best in class is like a destination. It's moving way too fast, and I just think what we need to assume is that state of the art is in permanent beta. It's always changing, because I was starting to look at different sites and realize over time that, man, you know, we really need to start thinking about some of these differently. I talked about Pinterest and Tumblr's content distribution opportunities. You know, I think that that's clearly an opportunity, and they're not just popular social sites. There's a reason why they're popular, and there is a reason that you should check them out. Google and Facebook, I think, are earned media outlets, really, earned media platforms. You know, we've gone from broadcasting to participating more with search engines. You know, I always used to think that, well, if you're on message, organic just kind of happens naturally. I got to tell you, though, for 4 years I've been at Empower, and it's a media agency, and they have a search contingency, a bunch of folks there, and it's more than that. You know, there's paid opportunities, but there's more to organic. You can take the search data and find out what your consumers are looking for as it relates to content, and then go and create it. Now, you don't want that to be guiding you 100% of the time. Obviously, it's art and science. You never want either one to take over. But it's important. I know of a local business journal, the Cincinnati Business Courier, and their page views, when they do that, when they pay attention to their search and use it to influence their stories editorial, their page views would go up like 20%. Now, if they did that 100% and let that guide them, there's gonna be a problem. They need to use their highly trained news minds to find the right stories on top of that. But it's just to say that it needs to be a blend. Talked about the shiny new, and even things like, you know, with agencies, it's like there's an opportunity for collaboration that's much stronger than the issue around competition, you know? And I know that sounds kind of Pollyanna, but I think it's true in today's day and age. So in summary, as I said before, visual communications is a very important part, clearly. I mean, there were some staggering facts in there that almost seem unbelievable, which is why I actually cited my sources on the slide. It's changing quickly. Clearly it's changing consumer habits, or vice versa, or maybe it's the technology, but it's just moving very quickly, and there's a lot of opportunity in it. It is part of a larger picture, and if we use it correctly, it'll be pretty easy to get through to our target audience. And with that, I'd like to open it up for questions. Luke Armour, I'm sure, has a question. I know, it's quite long. I apologize. If it was an infographic, it'd be easier for you. I apologize. Yes.
You see a lot of these, I mean, there's always going to be upstarts with all these new social media networks and so forth. Do you foresee, is there going to be considerable consolidation? Are the bigger ones going to continue to get bigger? Should we spend more of our time mastering those, or should we look at some of the upstarts?
I mean, the problem is I'm usually at these conferences, and somebody will say either what's going to be big in 5 years, And I just showed you what changed in 4 years, so anybody that tries to answer that question really shouldn't be up on the stage talking, because they don't know. And I think really the way things are going, I did a presentation a while back about adaptive modeling, and part of that was instead of being in phases of, like research at the beginning, then you do your plan, and then you execute, and then you measure. We have all this opportunity with data where we can kind of optimize, and it's not like we're consistently planning. I mean, we've got that core plan we go back to, but we can kind of use this data to move it a little bit and make sure that we are more successful. And honestly, I think as part of that, I said that you want to also have some time for R&D or test and learn, right? So I think really you spend your core where your audience is at, and then you spend some of that R&D time testing out and just getting an opinion on some of the other sites so that you can make an educated decision as to whether or not you should be spending time on it. I mean, by no means should you be spending time on everything. It's not feasible. It would be quite frustrating, in fact. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does. And your key point there, there's not enough hours in the day
No.
yet and experience all of these, but how will you put your time?
And I think a couple things that, when we'll get asked by clients a lot about certain things, and initially it used to always be, we need this, we need that, we need one of those. And the first thing we would say, well, okay, well that's, what we're talking about, but let's talk about why, and kind of back it up and make it a little bit more of a strategic discussion. So then you can find out if it was because the CEO saw that the competitors had more Facebook likes, and then you're like, okay, so there's absolutely no strategy here. What are we going to do? I think that the other thing is don't go chasing someone else's success. I mean, the fact that, and Shell's going to go into this, I'm not going to get too deep into Oreo, but what happened with Oreo in the Super Bowl wasn't just because they had a bunch of people on site to take advantage of that when it happened. I mean, they've been doing that 100-year campaign for quite some time. And they were able to do that. I saw that Kraft, are you going to talk about Kraft, Shell, and the Grammys? Okay. So Kraft tried to do the same thing in the Grammys, and they did like a video. They didn't do any advertising, and they were trying to be a big deal. And they were trying to, do real-time content and maybe chase what happened with Oreo. And of course, it failed miserably. And my whole point is, Kraft mayonnaise is sandwich lube. What does it have to do with the Grammys? I mean, is there relevance there, right? But the fact that they were like, we got to do this real-time content thing, and we got to get on board with this. The Grammys is the next biggest event. We'll pick that. We'll do it. I'm like, there isn't a huge connection there with mayonnaise. So chasing someone else's success, again, if they're like, I want to be like them, that's something else that you kind of need to kind of put the brakes on and figure out a way to back up the conversation. Hopefully you can. Yes?
How do you think national print media has adapted to social media? After all, they're a continuous flow of visuals.
Yes. I think some are better than others. I think National's doing a better job, especially New York Times. They've got an army of graphic and interactive designers, and they can do some stuff with data, for example. I remember they did like a map of the US, took every tweet from the Super Bowl, and you had a slide bar based on the time of the game. So halftime, everybody was talking about Beyonce tweets, and you could see where they were at on the map, where they were talking about them too. It was intense. I think that LA Times does an interesting job. Some are still trying to find their way, and they just kind of use them to broadcast instead of trying to engage and just drive page views. And that's a losing battle at best if it works at all. Yes.
One of the infographics, the one that you showed with McDonald's.
Yes.
Do you create those yourself, or do you have those on like a Shutterstock and find them?
Well, the video I showed you at the beginning, I did that on Animoto. There, for infographics, there's a site called PictoChart, P-I-K-T-O, chart, Picto. I did not create the McDonald's one. That was actually online. I just felt that it made the point really well. And actually, I consider that to be a data visualization versus an infographic. I'm splitting hairs, though. Regardless, there are a lot of tools online, including, in addition to PictoChart, if you just, search on Google for online infographic generator. PictoChart's got a free model, and then if you do the paid model, you get a much larger amount of templates you can customize. It's a pretty nice tool, and there's others like that that are out there too for infographics. But that's the other thing is, as the technology's gotten more powerful, it's also gone to be cheap or free. I mean, so you have access to a lot of these tools. You just may not have thought about that in the past. Yes.
So let's go back to print products. You talked about Gannett investing in small-sized printing presses.
Do you work for Gannett?
Nope.
Okay.
It used to be a newspaper, so I'm interested in whether or not print product is dead, how they're adapting in your product.
I hope not. I really hope not. Personally, I like the print experience. I don't want it to go anywhere. I think that ultimately they're still trying to find their way, and I think they need to think less that they're print, and a lot of them are now. They're thinking of themselves as local news or whatever their focus is, and they're thinking about it across all those platforms. Like, New York Times is one of them. They're in that mode of, okay, well, what's our deliverable? What does our audience need? And then they just say, well, how does it live on those platforms, and what makes the most sense for those platforms? I think those are the folks that are doing the best job. It sounds kind of zen that to be a good print publication, to not think of yourself as a print publication, but I guess that's kind of the MO. Just think of what your content focus is, and start to consider how it lives on those platforms. Does that help? Yes.
Value is for gamifications and gamifications and contests as an add-on to just images, videos posted out there.
Gamification. I think that there's a definite opportunity there. I think, Shelley, you covering that? You getting into game? Oh, you're not? I know you've covered it in the past. I was hoping you were. No, I do think that for the right opportunity, for the right strategy, the gamification could certainly be an opportunity. Again, though, I always like to kind of back up the truck and say, well, what are we trying to accomplish, and what's the path of least resistance to effectively get to our consumer and get them to take this action, right? And if that's gamification, that's great, but if it causes them one more second of thought than they need, and I risk losing them, no, it's not. So, and it's just crazy to me that even Facebook, it's like, well, I can't even have to open the app. I want to be like part of the operating system when they turn on the phone. I mean, that's how far this has gone. And Facebook started the whole thing when they realized that when they were liking and fanning, there was an exponentially, intensely large number of people that were liking, but fanning was like a commitment somehow. So nobody would fan, everybody would like. So they turned that and made that the universal thing. They made it this lightweight user action. It went off the charts. And now other sites are liking. It became this standard. Yes?
Are there any studies out there, by generation, what platforms are being utilized more? The reason I ask this is because my 17-year-old hasn't been on Facebook for almost
Sure.
a year. She's on Instagram.
Yep.
My 11-year-old last night told me that only old people are on Facebook. And she's not going because she won't go on Facebook, which she doesn't have an account anyways because she's too young, I feel. But
Sure.
do you have any input?
Honestly, I feel like you've got the best focus group right there. I mean, that's my thing is, I think people make a lot of assumptions. People used to assume that, well, teens aren't a good target for TV because they're texting. Yeah, but they're texting in front of the TV. People weren't taking that into consideration, or everybody thought mobile meant outside. Mobile means everywhere. It doesn't mean outside. It could mean in front of your TV. The research is all well intended, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be a pretty broad demographic as it relates to your audience. You need to just kind of roll up your sleeves. I think that in times like that, I say this about clout too. I'm like, clout's a very polarizing thing, and I know why. I get it. But I'm like, it's directional. If you're using it directionally, you just aren't betting the farm on whatever this auto magic algorithm spits back at you, you'll be fine. And that's what I think is, you can use some of that data maybe, or even your gut as sort of directional, but then you just need to roll up your sleeves and get on and start looking for your consumer and figure out where they're at. I mean, used to tell people that social media is a full contact sport, but started to send potentially a wrong message. But my point is just that, you know, you have to participate. Someone on the team has to participate and start to figure that stuff out. Great. Thank you, guys. Oh, cool. Thank you. Should probably turn my mic off now. Just going to run to the restroom real quick.
Thanks, Kevin. Next on the agenda is breakout session number 1. So stay in this room for showcasing your brand, activating online activity using social platforms. That's with Caitlin Lustenborg and Nader Ali Hassan, both with Rosetta Social Media.
I'm sorry. A couple of things, you know, off the bat, we're going to go through just some examples. Seriously, if you have questions in the middle of it, something doesn't make sense, just raise your hand. We're not offended. We can rather talk about this stuff more than just lecture like a professor, because who wants to hear us talk that long anyway? A couple other things too. I mean, basically, like we said, we're going to talk about, you know, showcasing your brand and give some examples. The one thing I want you to take out of this, the one thing we want you to take out of this, the platform doesn't matter. Everyone talks in social media about whether, it's Facebook or it's Vine or Tumblr or Highlight, which is creepy. We can talk about that later. But the platform doesn't matter. It's all about storytelling, right? There was the whole bit in the beginning, what Kevin was talking about, around, like, you know, the visual representation things. All those pictures, those infographics, data analysis, all that, that's just telling a story. The best person I ever worked with, the mentor, the person that drove me and kind of taught me how to do this, didn't have a PR degree and didn't have a communications degree even. She was a poet. She had her Master's of Arts at the Chicago Art Museum, whatever it's called, in poetry. Which, you know, I mean, my mom got mad when I thought about getting a liberal arts degree all those years ago, and now I'm realizing, wow, that's exactly the right person to get. Someone who can tell a really concise, short story in 140 characters. Why wouldn't it be a poet? I mean, you know, obviously you got to learn how to manage communities and all the other stuff, but still, like that idea, right? That idea of storytelling and storytelling in short bursts, that's the key. Facebook's fine, and that's what people are on now. Tumblr, maybe more for kids and things like that, and everything else. But really, as we talk about this, think about the stories. That's really the key. That being said, I'm going to ruin everything and give you a spiel about who Rosetta is at first, so I feel bad because it's a boring part of the story. But really, who we are at Rosetta, we're not your typical advertising agency. We're more of, we look at things in a couple little bit different ways. We're very much an e-commerce platform. We're part of the Publicis Group, which includes Razorfish and Digitas and Leo Burnett, all these kind of international agencies. We have 1,200 people in Cleveland, but we're focused on two things. Personalized lifecycle management, which is really a boring way of saying every touch point in the marketing funnel, we're kind of there, whether it's social media, search engine optimization, email, things like that. And also commerce and content, which is where we're actually building the platforms and intersecting both kind of the marketing aspect and the e-commerce aspect, putting those two together. We've got 9 offices around the country. Our biggest one is in Cleveland, which is great. We got 6 industry verticals that we touch on a lot, things from telecom to hotels and, what's the technical name of it now? That's right, yeah. You can't even read it, that's awesome. Entertainment and travel, financial services. Yeah, you can tell I do this a lot. And also, Forrester thinks we're pretty good at what we do, which is nice. We like that as well. For when we talk about social media, and I think this is important too, because it just kind of makes, I want to give everyone the ground view of kind of where we're coming from. Our philosophy is a little different, right? Like social's at the core of everything digital. So this idea that you have social media agencies and you have advertising agencies and PR agencies and technology agencies, doesn't matter. It's all intersecting right now. And the idea that some of the best PR agencies in the world have great creative people to help with the visualization. And they also have great technologists, because that's really where this is all going anyway. Social's not a campaign, you guys all know this. It's this idea that it's a very long tail thing. We can come up with nice, fun ideas, but the brilliance around the Oreo thing, and I used to do a lot of work with a lot of those kind of craft brands out in New Jersey, was that it was built on a long-standing precipice of things that were going on time and time again that they just took advantage of right at the same time. They had the fuel. The whole Old Spice thing, everyone remembers that, right? Like the really nice looking guy with no clothes on giving you like Twitter videos or whatever on YouTube. That just didn't come out of nowhere. They just, they had built a reputation. They had used Twitter for months to build up that buzz. So when the moment that dropped, everyone was ready and everyone was already looking for it. The other thing to focus on too is really around the relationships. That's really what we're talking about, right? It's the one-to-one relationship, everyone talks about that, but it's really the one-to-many. From a brand perspective, you can have some one-on-one customer service type relationships, but you're also talking to a large group of people. That one-to-many, one-to-the-mass, that's something that we need to focus on for brands. Second to last thing too, content is king. Okay, everyone's heard that, and that's all well and good, but really what it is now is data is king. How do we use, the Intel example is one of my favorite ones. We built one thing for BlackBerry in an old agency I worked with that took people's social information and spun it out to them, exactly what the Intel thing did, but used it from a marketing perspective because people were going to share it, right? I want to know that I'm the most, that's why cloud, I think, even exists, so people can brag around how awesome they are compared to their friends and what their social media ranking is. But the thing that data can tell you isn't just about you, but it's really about your friends and those connections. I found out that the first post I put in was in 2006 or 2007, and that this person was following me the longest. And I've interacted with this person more than anybody else. Stuff I never would have thought about. How can a brand take advantage of that data, repurpose it, shove it out to their fans, and then get marketing benefit from that as well? And then the last thing, too, is that brands are social publishers. It's great what the New York Times is doing and what newspapers are doing and everything else, but the brands that are really owning the space, Starbucks, Coca-Cola, even kind of newcomers, I think Delta, for example, they're all publishing their own content. They all have a point of view. Every brand, regardless of you've got 26 million fans like Samsung does, or 100 fans like a small mom and pop boutique. Every single one of those brands has a story, and those fans that follow those are interested in that point of view. The content that we create, the stories that we tell from a brand perspective are what people are looking for, and that's how we generate advocacy, ultimately. So that's a little bit about us. So what we really want to talk about is this evolution of content and some other things as well. We'll start with that. So this idea that content is evolving is interesting, right? I mean, if you think about it, and Luke's not here anymore, but me and Luke used to work together. I don't know, who's here from Kent State? I should ask this at the beginning. Who's a student still? Okay, and everyone else, let me guess, professionals, right? Awesome, okay, glad you raised your hands, guys. So when Luke Armour, who's now running the internship program here, me and him used to work together way back at Fleischmann-Hillard. Our whole thing was, it was very much around the early stages of what social media was blogging, right? Long form content. I'm gonna write for what seemingly feels like 5-6 pages. I'm gonna tell you everything about myself. I'm going to create a brand around that, and that's how brands were communicating, long form. Yelp got involved. Facebook came about. Then it was in Twitter, and that 140 characters, the status update, right? It's all about shrinking mindset, shrinking content. We don't have a lot of time, need to get out really quick. Foursquare. Tumblr kind of reverted back, but the interesting thing with Tumblr, too, is that it started to be kind of, I would argue, even though Tumblr's even been around a little longer, the interesting thing about Tumblr is that it was kind of a rebellion against this kind of shortened time span, right? Tumblr's great for cat videos and things like that, and whatever, the balls with cats, which I find hilarious. I think my wife submitted one yesterday. But I think the interesting thing, though, too, is that people, while things are getting shorter, and as we see, Pinterest, right? I'm going to share a click. It doesn't really, what does that mean? That's fine. But what people are really getting interested in is this idea that not only can I do things in a really short, kind of methodical way, but people are also really interested in this idea that I also need to be able to tell my story, right? The short click is fine, but I still want opportunities to share a video like Vine, even though it's a shorter video than maybe something you do on YouTube. Tumblr has been a really great way of that. Instagram as well. Okay, I'll share a photo, but it's a little more than a click. That instant, the kind of shortened stories, it's definitely shorter than what it was in 2000. But I think you're going to start to see, and I have no idea what's going to happen in 5 years. No one knows. But I think it's going to be this mix. I think it is going to be, the attention spans are shortening. But there are going to be opportunities, and the platforms where people can really tell their story or brands can tell their story are still going to perpetuate. They're still going to be important, right? For us, when we think about a brand story, it's really one post at a time. A lot of people, we run into this a lot at work. A lot of brands come in and they're going to try to throw everything they can in the kitchen sink out on social, right? We're going to have some posts on Facebook and on Twitter, throw up a video on YouTube, we'll throw some interesting recipes for whatever reason, even though you have nothing to do with food, on Pinterest. That's all well and good. But the truth is your social profile, both from your person, but also from the brand that you represent, that's a story, right? Everything's a story and it has to be connected. The best brands in this space, it's not just, here's a contest, and then over here, here's another contest, and then down the road, we're gonna throw up some stuff on YouTube. It's not connected, that doesn't work. The best brands in social media are the ones that are taking the post that they put on Facebook, which is connected to this post on Twitter, which is connected to this thing on Pinterest, to this overall campaign that they're running across all of them, right? That story, that's where we talk about storytelling is so important in this space. That's why journalists, honestly, we're in a journalism school, journalists rule the day also in social media outside of our poetry friends. The idea is that because they know that they don't bury the lead, they tell the story and they get the story across in a short and condensed space. That's the key. Brands are starting to do that. We're going to go through a few examples on some platforms too, but you get the idea where people are taking advantage of these new technologies and they're able to push the envelope a little bit more. So yeah, so basically, this is something everyone's seen, right? The conversation prism, it's Brian Solstice, it's from 2010. It's all the social media platforms that are around, 3 years ago. Half of these are gone, half of these there's some new ones that came out probably in the last 5 minutes, and they will be, gone by the end of the day today. But the point is that it's not just about Facebook. This is what everyone, and for folks who work professionally in the space, everyone comes to you, what is my Facebook strategy? How am I going to rule Facebook? I want an app, and I want a tab, and I want photos, and all that other stuff. That's all great. Facebook is one player in a huge space. Now, it may be the hub of your social media universe, and that's great, but what are the other platforms that are around? What are the opportunities that you have that can fuel that, right? That's what we need to focus on. So, let's see. So what we wanted to do is talk about 4 kind of newer, and I put that in quotes, platforms, and kind of how brands are starting to use them a little bit. Pinterest, obviously, everyone knows, it's kind of, it's been around, a couple of years. Started from a guy who was bored at Facebook, turned down IPO money to start Pinterest. At the time, kind of a bad idea. Now, probably genius. Vine, Instagram, Tumblr, these are all kind of newer social platforms. Tumblr's, but like we said, it's been around a while, but the way people are using it now is a little different. I want to talk a little bit about them and kind of show how brands are using these and what makes a lot of sense, right?
Oh, I was just going to say, we're going to talk about a little bit about Pinterest first, but first just wanted to see, has anyone not heard of Pinterest? Just make sure you all know what Pinterest is. Awesome. But then, for those of you who are on Pinterest, why do you love Pinterest? When you go on there, what do you love about interacting with that site?
Visual. You in the blue shirt, you were about to say something, you were laughing in front of you. Anything?
Yeah, visual.
Visual? Awesome.
But when you go on there, when you're interacting with what kind of boards are you interacting with? What kind of things are you pinning? Hobbies, quotes. Shout them out, guys. I want to hear your voices. Outfits.
Can I just ask, is any guy pinning anything on Pinterest?
Yeah, I heard a lot of girls up here.
Okay, good. I think I win the bet.
Well, the really great thing about Pinterest and the way you can really tell your story on that, people love inspiration. They love being inspired by things. I have a ton of fitness boards and really get inspired, I'm going to do these 10-minute workouts with the best body ever. Obviously, that doesn't happen. But the real value for brands is you can really, provide people that inspiration, but also make it really easy for people to buy your product from that inspiration. And if you look at what Lowe's does, they have a ton of different boards, all very visual, all, about, grilling outside or improving your lawn or whatnot. But what makes them great is that their photos aren't only visual, but they also link back to a product that you can buy to help you make that board. So it's really about, not only providing inspiration, but also making it easy for that person to actually, go and purchase and make that a reality. And I think the good thing about Lowe's too is like, when we talk about telling your story, their tagline is, never stop improving. And I think they're really, showing that with their Pinterest boards.
Absolutely. I turned off my mic. I don't know if the feedback. Can you guys still hear me in the back? Cool. Okay. So the great thing about Lowe's too is the strategy that they employ, right? We talked about the storytelling and connecting their pieces. This is a great example of what they're doing on Pinterest. But their Facebook page is also fueling the same idea, the same idea of improvement. If their entire brand essence is being carried through on what is for them a new platform. Pinterest may go away in a year or two, and that's okay for them, because they've got all the other players in the space fueling the same idea, right? And I think that's really the benefit of it.
So next we're gonna talk a little bit about Vine. I'm gonna ask the same question. Anybody on Vine, a reason you really love it? Alexa, your hand was first.
What?
So your hand was first.
I love Vine.
And like, what do you love about it?
It just takes the next step from sharing video, and you can stop and start, and you can kind of do some fun things with it, where it's not just taking a direct video. There's a little bit of editing capability, so you can do more with it creatively.
Yeah.
Considering what's going on today, I'll tell you just an interesting story. So I'm a Boston guy. So everyone knows I grew up in the city. And before we were meeting, I was showing Caitlin a lot of my friends live in the towns that are now, I don't know if you guys have all seen today, have all been shut down due to what happened on Monday. One of the most powerful things I woke up to this morning was a Vine video that a friend of mine shot of the police guy, of the cruisers and the lights during the shootout at 2 in the morning or whatever it was. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, my reaction, duck and cover, because that seems to be the normal reaction you want to do. I don't mean to make light of this, but this person, and it's on my Facebook feed, had to grab their phone and started shooting the video, shot it up on Vine, and my entire newsfeed is filled with videos, photos, but especially videos, and especially using Vine, of what's been going on in the last 6 to 12 hours. It's pretty powerful stuff, and if you think about the fact that how easy that is now, right? A couple years ago, to upload a photo to the internet, you have to render it, you have to put it up on YouTube, maybe it'd be too big, and then you have to go through that process again, or whatever. Now it takes 2 seconds. That's the power of that is unimaginable. And I don't know, I think that's really neat, and that's really where Vine is, and how do brands talk about it? How can brands take advantage of it and use that technology for their own benefit too?
Yeah, and I mean, to kind of pony off that, I mean, I think it's still a baby. Like this platform has only been around for 6 months or so. So I think brands are still trying to figure out like what's the best use of this and how can I really, find value in using Vine. I mean, a lot of fashion brands started using it during fashion weeks to show their fans, okay, here's like a quick 6-second video of, the new fashions that are coming out. So the fashion world is really, gravitated toward this. But one actual local example, well, local, national, but Joanne has actually done a really great job with Vine. They do these like quick 6-second DIY crafts. And I mean, Joanne, they're all about, crafting and, doing things yourself. And they've really taken this platform and made it really easy to show people how to do friendship bracelets or make a headband out of a t-shirt. So I think, people are still trying to, figure out like what's the best use for me? How do I find value? But those are just some quick examples.
Obviously, another thing we want to talk about too is Instagram. And really, Instagram is a platform that's about photos. How do brands use photos to communicate their message? I'll just get straight to it. One of my favorite ones is Audi. Right? Maybe because I don't want an Audi, I don't know. But what they've done, and it's interesting, working for a competitor of theirs for a while, everyone looked at Audi as like the gold standard for visual, and this was a company, for visual representation of their brand. They're kind of one of those brands that pushes the envelope a little bit when it comes to social media, not only visually, but using clout to generate buzz around a new car launch, actually, where they created a contest where, if I remember this right, the higher your clout score, the more you would get, the more information you would get around this new car they were launching that they wanted to promote, right? The thing that Audi does is they don't just, they use their Twitter and their Facebook and Instagram, they use all their things visually, but they go down, they not only produce their own content, which is slick. They got really great photographers out of AKQA in San Francisco, who's their social media agency, really driving home a lot of this stuff. But they use user-generated photos as well, which, again, Kevin mentioned, it's funny, Kevin mentioned a lot of the same stuff we were talking about earlier. This idea of being authentic, being real. Your fans are your best advocates for you, right? And we talked about with what's going on today in Boston, people have their cameras with them all the time. The photos that they're going to get from a photojournalistic standpoint, but also for anyone anyone who works in the auto industry, you look during any of the auto shows. You see a spike of just people freaking out and taking pictures of the latest Audi. They were grabbing those photos and instantly putting them up on their own feeds, promoting it from Frank in Detroit, who's taking a photo of the new whatever it is, A4, I don't know. It doesn't matter. Like the idea that they were taking those photos from their friends, sharing that, using that advocacy and building momentum from it. That's what a lot of the great brands are doing visually. Audi's just one of them. I know Starbucks is doing some interesting things. I mean, honestly, think about it. It's coffee. There's not that much to talk about, right? But if you can find other things outside of just your brand, around the lifestyle of what Starbucks represents for people, music, this idea of community and this idea of sitting together and kind of talking about things, which is where they're going a little bit. That's the essence of it. And using photos, videos, using these types of things to communicate that has been the most powerful. And the last one we wanted to talk about is Tumblr, we'll ask everyone familiar with Tumblr, right? Yeah, okay. Someone mentioned that their kid thinks all old people are on Facebook and now young people are on Tumblr. It's not, the research has completely proven that out. Who knows if Facebook's going to die? I don't think so. Everyone's invested way too much in it already. But the fact that Tumblr is kind of this interesting place where not only people can share photos of balls replaced with cats and everything else, but Tumblr's been a place where it has become a really cool visual medium for people to tell their own stories. And for brands who want to tap into that market are jumping on that as well. One of the best examples is Coke. And it's not just that, Coke uses Tumblr as a platform, as a way to express their creativity in a way that's much more fun than Facebook, right? Facebook's boring. If you think about it from a visual perspective, Facebook is the most boring of boring places, right? Little blue line, you have a white box to play in. That's your iPhone, go nuts.
Although Nader, they are trying to be a little more visual.
Right, they're trying to be more visual. That's a good point. It's still boring, right? And honestly, talk to any creative person you've ever worked with who designs stuff for a living and tell them you need to build an app on Facebook and watch the eyes roll in the back of their head. But on Tumblr, you've got tons of space. You do almost anything you want as long as your creativity allows you to do it, and you can still hit if you're doing it for the right brand or for yourself, in the right place where people are and where their audience is growing exponentially year over year, right? Coke does, Coke has a marketing budget that makes me very jealous. but they can do everything, think about it. They are taking their resources and they're putting it into Tumblr. They're telling that story in a way, and they're connecting with people where they are. And they're connecting with an audience that they really want to tap into, considering all the other stuff that Coke's going through, at least right now in terms of New York and the whole reducing soft drinks and things like that. They're still reaching out to young people, and they're doing it in a way that is connecting with them. So I'm going to...
Well, before we hop into a case study, does anyone have any questions, thoughts? Really want to open up and make it a little more lively in here, guys.
Yeah, and I also know that it's 1,000 degrees, and I say that because I'm sweating. Awesome. Not embarrassing at all. Alexa, yeah.
Is there any plan on Vine going to Android?
I've heard that I know that they've been working on an app. It's kind of like, remember when Instagram was only started on the iPhone, right? And then it took, a year and a half for them to get an Android app. I think that's going to happen. I think that's going to happen a lot faster now that Samsung has kind of taken on kind of a larger market share, that it's kind of forcing brands to really think about kind of a dual provider strategy.
When pitching it to brands in your line of work, have you had any kickback from companies saying we don't want to do anything online because not everyone can access it, or not enough people, or?
It conservative brands that, if they even Vine scares them, I think on initially, but if you can get past that level, I think some yeah, a little bit. Though I think here, anybody in the room who has an Android, raise your hand. That's about at most 7%, 8%. That's honestly, I've been in meetings before and I've asked the exact same question, and I've had rooms where no one's raised their hand. That's it. Everyone has an iPhone, right? My mom has an iPhone. Says a lot more about iPhone than I think about my mom, but still, that's really where it's. That's the thing. That's where it's going. It will get to Android. I think they'll expand with a web application, all that other stuff as well. It's going to take a little bit of time. But it's still really new.
Right, and I think the point too is you just want to make sure your audience is on there and actively using it. And so if your audience isn't really iPhone users and they're not super mobile savvy, that may just not be the correct place. So it's just really about who your audience is and where are they most active.
And this might be silly for everybody who knows SEO.
Nothing silly.
If you are on Tumblr, we're a B2B company,
Okay.
and I know most Tumblr is B2C stuff,
Sure.
but does it help your SEO at all on Tumblr?
Well, did everyone hear the question? Someone was asking if Tumblr benefits from an SEO perspective. It's complicated because in theory it doesn't, but there are ways around it.
It does a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not as good as a WordPress or a Blogger or anything like that, but it does have some impact.
The way the back end relates to the Google spiders when they're grabbing it for SEO benefit, it's a little.
All right.
We can talk about that all.
So, that's all over my
No, that's fine. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Geek out about this stuff. Yes.
You were talking about Lowe's, and you gave an example of how what they're doing on Pinterest, and you said that if Pinterest went away in 6 months, they'd still have what they're doing on Facebook, and there's always this complication of how do you put the message out there on different platforms, but a little bit different. How do you approach that?
Okay, so, and Caitlin's gonna hate me for saying this because I've been saying this around the office a lot lately. Think of it like a hub and spoke, right? Facebook and Twitter, the biggest platforms you have, are at the center of your social media universe for 99% of the brands that are out there, right? The other things, your Pinterest, Instagram, Vine, everything else, it goes in, they kind of go in and out, right? In theory, right? Spoke to the hub, right? So in the instance of Lowe's and Pinterest, yes, they've invested time and energy creating boards and with their content and with everything else. There's some things that are different about Pinterest than are on Facebook, but the real key about this is that because they're connected, because their strategy aligns in a certain way, that they have that story that they're telling, regardless of platform it's being connected through, it may look different, right? Twitter isn't going to look the same as Pinterest. Some of the stories are going to be a little bit different based on the platform and what it is. Because that essence exists there, it doesn't matter what platform it is, right? Everyone know what Highlight is? I'll just use this as an example because I find it's always hilarious. All right, so Highlight was an app, that they tried to release it at South by Southwest last year, in 2012. And Highlight, there's actually a point to this. So Highlight came out to huge fanfare because everyone at South by Southwest always wants to know what the next Twitter is, right? That's the thing, they want to jump on it. So Thursday of South by Southwest Interactive, Highlight is launched. Everyone's tweeting about it. What Highlight is an app that essentially was like this idea of you create a social network around like interests, right? So I'm a Boston Red Sox fan. Alexa is a Boston Red Sox fan. I don't know. I know you're not. I don't know Alexa at all. But because we're Boston Red Sox fans, it's going to tell me I should go talk to Alexa and introduce myself because we have a common interest, right? In theory, okay, that makes sense. In reality, though, I know everybody in this room, as soon as I described it, thought one thing: creepy, right? Really creepy. So much so that brands had heard a little bit about this coming out, and people were starting to talk about how we could use Highlight from a marketing perspective, right? People started actually to come up with plans on how to use Highlight from a marketing perspective. Airlines were thinking about, I talked to an airline that was thinking about using it in the seat as part of your seat selection process. If you wanted to know who you wanted to sit with, I know, raise your eye, they actually implemented it with LinkedIn and Facebook. They thought about using it with Highlight. The reason why I mention it is so that you have all these plans on how you're going to use Highlight, right? It got launched on the Thursday at South by Southwest. By the Saturday of South by Southwest, no one ever wanted to know about it or use about it because everyone freaked out at how creepy it was. So So my point is that like some of the ideas that you can come up with on a new platform, and there's always the bright, shiny toy, and there are people and brands that are always going to clam for that, right? They want to be the first. They don't really know the first to what. They have no idea, but they want to be the first. Sometimes it works, right? I'll be the first on Twitter. I'm going to look like a genius. First guy on highlight, not so much. And that's really, I mean, and that's where it is. If you have a good brand and a good story behind you and a good strategy behind that, regardless of whether you strike out on whatever the new highlight is or you hit a home run on the new Twitter, it's going to be fine because your story is going to continue to go along all the other platforms you have all the other folks. Anyone else have any questions? Bueller? No, okay. So let's go into a case study then.
Cool. So this is just a case study that kind of shows how we activated an event with Chase Sapphire. Anyone not know Chase Sapphire? Basically, they're a credit card that they want to be the enjoyment company. They want all us professionals who work too much to enjoy life just a little bit more. So basically, they sponsor the Sundance Film Festival. This is an amazing bucket list trip. You know, people from all over the world come to Park City to see all the new films and hang out with celebs and whatnot. So overall, like the objectives of this entire campaign was to really enhance and reinforce the card benefits, create card envy, show people, hey, I'm a Chase Sapphire card member, I went to Sundance, you should be jealous and get the card so you can do it too. So basically on site, they have this huge building in Park City, right on Main Street. It's filled with film memorabilia. It has this little photo shoot area that you can go and be in your favorite Sundance film. They have a dining concierge that can get you the hottest table on Main Street and in Park City because reservations are absolutely super hard to get. So they've been doing this for the past 2 years or so. And so they asked us basically to bring this offline presence online, and bring it to the digital and social space. So we really wanted to, make the users at home feeling like they were getting the Chase Sapphire Sundance experience right from their desktop or their mobile device. So they really felt, not only what was happening at the building, but also, what were the movies that were there? What was the landscape like? What was that experience really about? So our approach was really to live share from Sundance. And use the social media platforms that we were already on to really, bring this experience to life. We also created this kind of digital one-stop shop that kind of fed all of that content into one place. So you could just kind of scroll through and see, what are people tweeting about? Where is Chase Sapphire now? What celebrities are they seeing? What is, the weather like in Park City? So we did that through Facebook. We had, our Facebook page was completely branded for Sundance. We also had a Facebook app that, drove to this hub. But we also ended up launching Instagram, as, Instagram is very visual and it's great for just live sharing and, sharing different photos. It went insanely well, and here are a few, examples of what we did. But I mean, basically, we, for 10 or 12 days, we were there shooting every single thing that happened, from the food that we ate at dinner to the landscapes that we saw right outside our window to the celebrities that came through the building. We shot it all, shared it all on our platforms, and our response was amazing. We had goals of getting, I think, 1,000 or so people to interact with our content. We blew that out of the water by 1,000%. People were just really, really excited to see all of this content and really bringing it to life, and not just from a brand perspective. We barely even mentioned Chase Sapphire, but really just showcasing if you are a card member, this is what you can do and this is what you can see, and really bringing that to the forefront.
And you got to meet Dave Grohl, which was cool.
I did get to meet Dave Grohl. It was awesome. So it was a really great way to kind of take something that it may not be online, but it could really bring it to life and show people this is kind of what you could do too.
And so yeah, and the idea is that's part of their story, right? If you think about it, from a strategy perspective, Chase is trying to compete with American Express. American Express, you've got your rewards, you've got your small business stuff. They really want to be about travel, and they want to be about that experience. So it's not like they're going to send all of their customers over to the Sundance Festival to hang out with Dave Grohl and eat really cool food. But if they can at least use the digital mediums and the audience that they have to share some of that information, that's a way that they can translate it. That's a way that they can make their card members feel like, wow, maybe I can get this as well. And that's really what the brand has been doing, and frankly, play any brand in any situation. That's what we all do, right? That's what we do for a living. The best brands, though, are the ones that are telling the better stories and interesting stories. And that story, and I just want to say one thing to that as well. It's great for Chase Sapphire, right? Going to Sundance is damn sexy. That's a cool thing to do. If you're a B2B brand that sells widgets, doesn't matter. There's still a story to tell, right? There's still something interesting that can get communicated. And those people, some of the most mundane B2B folks have great social followings because they've got personality and authenticity behind them to drive that customer engagement. Yes?
So now this was designed to make existing holders of the Sapphire card feel good about having that card, or were they expecting to get more people to sign up for the card, and did you track that? Or?
Both.
Yeah, it was a little bit of both, showing, existing card members, like, these are the types of things we can give you. Like, you have access to this. You should feel good that, this is something that, we do for you. But also, showing, people who aren't a Chase Sapphire, like, look at what we can give you. Like, we are, this enjoyment brand. We can, give you these types of experiences. So you should sign up and use our card, and you can, be here too. So it was a little bit of both.
Who supplied the content?
Caitlin did, actually.
Yeah, there were two of us on site, just bouncing around Park City, taking photos. Incidentally, did not realize that not all of the movie theaters were in one place, so we were, all over. But it was really, us just taking photos with our iPhones. Like, most of those photos are all taken with my iPhone, and filtered a little bit. Shared on Instagram, maybe shared one or two on Facebook. So, the Instagram users got a lot more photos than our Facebook followers did, just because that was, the nature of the channel. Like, you can post 5 or 6 great photos on Instagram and see a lot of engagement and get a lot of value out of that. But on Facebook, people may not see it just with the algorithm and, the way Facebook is.
So, like we've said over and over again, probably, to the point where we're almost in nausea, it's the story first. That's where we start with all of this. Think of your story and your strategy, define it at the beginning. That'll help you carry that through everything that you do. Don't think of it as like a short blip, and then you can go change it later on. When you're getting involved in social, think about that story, think about what that's going to be, and really try to carry that through everything that you do. Whether it's your voice that's defined not through your community manager, but what your voice represents, carry that through. That's where success is ultimately going to come, and that's what people are looking for. It's kind of, honestly, the expectation now, right? You could say this a year or two ago, and people would be like, oh, that makes a whole lot of sense. Now people are really expecting brands to have that story, to have that authentic voice, and have that carried through everything that they do. Think about the platforms that are going to help you amplify that story. It's important as well. Not everybody needs to be on Vine or Instagram or Pinterest. If you happen to work for a company that, let's say, makes blenders in the Cleveland area, for example, Pinterest might be a good place to be, right? Like that, for recipes and things like that. But if you are a B2B widget maker, making, industrial steel parts for airplanes, Pinterest might not be the right place. I mean, you got to think through that as well. Number 3 is seemingly the simplest bullet here, but also the most complicated. The reason why that Chase case example and why we include it here, why it works, is because Caitlin was on the ground getting that content. She was there bumping into Dave Grohl and making me very jealous, but going and meeting celebrities and talking to them, which, okay, doesn't seem, I want that life, that seems nice, but But still, putting the feet on the pavement, getting that content, weaving those pieces around with the food and the story to tell that overall story of what you're trying to get across. That's the key. It's almost like engaging and compelling content, yeah, but it's authentic too. It's coming from a place of where real people are telling a story. No one connects with a brand, right? I don't care what Nike has to say. But if the community manager is interesting and is someone I would consider a friend of mine if you want, then I'm going to follow them on Facebook. And when I see them on my newsfeed in that precious time that I have in the morning, I'm actually going to pay attention to what they have to say. The brands that I always ignore are the ones that are trying to hit me over the head with a sale message, or trying to tell me, some really corporate sounding PR shtick about whatever else. That doesn't mean anything to me. Put a real person behind it, a real person telling me a story, then I'm going to pay attention.
And I think that's a good point that you made. Like, you really want to try to, be their friend. Like, you want to make, like, when they look in their newsfeed, they want to see content that's, relating to them. That's what they're going to interact with. That's what they're going to engage with. So it's your goal should almost, who is my consumer and how can I be their friend and share valuable information with them?
The best creative director I ever worked with asked me once when we were planning a strategy for somebody. He asked me, would you follow us if you had no connection to the brand at all? Right? And ask yourself that question as you work in brands and stuff. Is this something you would follow? Do you care about whatever this person is talking about? And if you don't, and if you're honest with yourself and you don't, you need to change. You need to think about, maybe it's not just about the product, but it's around the lifestyle around that product. That's something that interests me or could interest me. It's just an interesting way of thinking about social media. And the last one also goes to the Lowe's point as well. Just, be flexible, open, but adjust as needed. There are going to be things, everyone here I know is working on a Facebook page right now, right? Everyone has Facebook as the center of the thing. There will be a time, probably sooner rather than later, where Facebook is not nearly as important as it is right now. If you stay on Facebook and you're not willing to shift from that and not willing to adjust what you think, optimize using data and see how people are reacting, if your audience is moving and you don't move with them, you're gonna be the last one there. So just be ready to be nimble and move on things.
For the Chase example, did you have any paid media to help support this and find those people who would be like new to your tribe?
We did Facebook ads. We promoted some of our posts and did some Facebook ads, but other than that, it was very much about just using our existing fans and making sure our content was shareable enough. It's funny, actually, with Instagram, we always, hashtag Sundance. And we found afterwards, most of the people who interacted with our content, came from like one of those hashtags. They weren't, previously following us, but they actually, saw our content within our hashtags and ended up, interacting and then ended up eventually following our brand.
That being said, paid media is a huge important factor that a lot of people overlook. I mean, I'm a PR guy, right? That's where my training was. So I thought everything had to be organic and that like the real story, and that's what matters is from a PR perspective. As you get involved in the space, and especially Facebook's trying to make money like everybody else, right? They're going to make it harder and harder for free content to end up in your fans' newsfeed. They'll make it really easy and frankly expensive for paid content to get in his way. There has to be a balancing act, if you want. Paid, owned, earned media as a concept is one that's been around, but really more so now today it's this kind of like this three-end triangle, three-corner triangle, which is exactly what a triangle is. But having those three pieces together, having them all intersect and having them play off of each other is really where brands are finding a lot of the success too, which is a whole other presentation. Anyone else? Any questions? So obviously consumer data, right? What people are interested in, I think would be number one. The story, the way I always communicate it is somewhat blunt, but no one is that interesting, right? Like, we all tweet, we're all on Facebook. There are times, I tweet a lot of photos. I've got a 6-month-old at home. I tweet way too many photos of my daughter, right? I swear. The only person that cares is my mom. She loves it. Everyone else hates me for it. No one is that interesting, and no brand is that interesting. But the brands that win are the ones, I mentioned this a little bit. So Lowe's, right? If Lowe's was going to talk about lawnmowers every day of the week, no one would care. But for Lowe's, they say, okay, what do we represent? What is our brand? Well, it's, it's like inspiring people around home projects and changing things around their house. So how do we, so you start talking about the things that are outside the circle of what that brand is. Audi, for example, right? Audi, okay, great. You can talk about steering wheels and radios and cars and engines and all that other stuff. But that brand represents something to people. And I think that's really what the conversation needs to be about. And that's where the brand, like I said, I think people are moving more towards that. In the back. Oh, man. Social media monitoring tool. Okay. Whoops. Sorry, get that. All right. Social media monitoring, you got to think of it in 3 separate ways because there's 3 different things that you can do with it. So interrupt me if I'm hitting the one that you're trying to accomplish, then we can maybe answer. The first part of social listening is kind of mining anonymously for data. There's a company that I really like called Motive Quest in Chicago that I keep talking about because I used to work with them and I love these guys. What they are able to do is look at anonymous data across the internet, not about your brand or whatever, and they're able to determine the white space, right? The place, through a lot of inquiry and a lot of research, that space where your brand could possibly play. Yeah? So there's listening, there's that the mining part. There's listening, like social media listening is the idea of listening to conversations about your brand, right? So I work on Lowe's, I'm going to listen to all the people outside on the blogosphere and on Twitter who are talking about Lowe's and get a good sense of that. And then there's like monitoring, which is like monitoring the platforms that you run, right? So if I'm Lowe's again, I'm gonna have good insights into my Facebook profile and what people are saying on Twitter, and get analytics from that. Which one are you kind of talking about?
Probably one of the latter.
Okay. Oh. All right. Man, I almost hate to answer this because honestly, it's a hard question. These guys change all the time, right? So, like.
And I think really it's too like, what are you looking to get out of it? Are you looking to just find the number of conversations? Are you looking to kind of get more high-level insights about what these people are saying? Or are you looking for more like every single minute I want to see who's giving me or who's talking about me? It really just spans. I mean, there's so many. And
we can talk about this afterwards if this makes sense. I'll tell you this though. If you're interested for high-level, kind of quick, dirty things that you can get visually, like visual representations of the data afterwards. Radian 6, or whatever now, I think they're owned by Salesforce, that's a decent tool. If you're looking for like a customized dashboard like Radian 6 on steroids, Evolve 24 is one that's been around for a while, but they're really solid in terms of what they're pulling. And there's a billion varieties in between, and they're changing their offerings every day. In fact, I talked to one company yesterday from Israel that only focuses on the healthcare market, but the stuff that they're pulling out is some information I've never seen being able to be grabbed out before. So it could very well be differentiated by the niche industry that you're working in as well. And it's probably a combination of all of these that are going to really get you that full story that you have. Because Facebook analytics isn't going to tell you anything about your community anyway. You need to go a step higher than that too. Anyone have any other questions? Great, you get some time off early. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Nader and Caitlin. We're a little early, but the next part of the program is to go out and get a lunch provided by Robert J. Events and Catering and return here. I'm not sure it's set up yet, but like you said,